If you go into treatment and, you're defiant, you're saying, I don't want to do this stuff. I think that, what they're telling me isn't going to work, right? It doesn't matter if you go to the Salvation Army Treatment Center or you go to Passages Malibu or $70,000 a month treatment center. Like, if you have that mindset, it's a lot tougher for it to work rather than going in and listening. And that's on the flip side. You can get sober at the Salvation Army. You can get sober at the nicest treatment center in the country, right? It's all about what you're going to do with the time that you have while you're in there and how you're going to maximize it.
Hello, I am B. Reeves with New Waters Recovery in Raleigh, North Carolina. Welcome to our weekly podcast, Finding New Waters. Our goal in creating Finding New Waters is to provide a resource for families to help navigate the complexities of supporting a loved one struggling with substance use or mental health. When we find ourselves in crisis due to one of these issues, most people have no idea where to turn. We hope to shed some light onto what is often the darkest hour for many families. Thank you.
Thank you guys for joining us for another episode of Finding New Waters podcast. My name is Justin McClendon, the Chief Executive Officer at New Waters Recovery. And we're joined today by Brian Aicher, the founder and clinical director at Firm Foundations Treatment in Atlanta. Is that correct? Right outside of Atlanta?
Yeah.
Perfect. And also Eddie Gleeson, who is the director of business development there as well. So guys, thank you. Really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So guys, why don't we start with, if you're comfortable with it, we'll start with Brian. Maybe Brian, you could tell us a little bit about, just who you are, background, what got you into the field, those types of things.
Great. So my name is Brian Aicher. I've been in behavioral health for about 15 years. I started working in the field around 2009 or 2010. I don't remember the exact year. I got sober and I got clean. I was in recovery in 2008 and started working in a sober living facility, doing some like a resident manager. And I was getting my undergrad degree from Georgia State, and was just trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, essentially. And I really just found a passion working with people in sober living. And there's a lot of one-on-one interactions with people at night, and just getting to know people. And I really found a passion working just with the men in the facility. And there was a couple of mentors I had in my life at the time. One of them was a therapist of mine, and I really looked up to him. And I made the decision to get my master's degree in social work and pursue a career as a therapist. So while I was working at the sober living facility as a resident manager, I went to get my master's. So I was just working there at night, and my wife already had a job. She had gotten her MBA, and I was traveling back and forth to Athens, and we were living in Smyrna. So it was about an hour and a half drive, and it was just like a commute 2 or 3 times a week, because we had already bought a house, and I was just commuting back and forth to Athens and working at night, and with the ultimate goal of being a therapist. And so that was in 2013 or 14 when I started the process. I graduated in 2015, and then I've worked at several facilities. I did some internships in psychiatric inpatient. I worked on an ACT team. I worked inpatient at a young adult treatment facility here in Georgia, Ridgeview, and outpatient facilities. I was in private practice for 4 years. I actually left the field for about a year and a half. I thought I was never going. Yeah, I thought I was never going to come back to the field. I mean, I was really having kind of a existential crisis. And I call it just like a spiritual formation with God. He was really kind of molding me and changing my path. And I left the field for about a year and a half and started doing some financial planning. And that's when my relationship with God really just exploded. And he led me back to the field. And And I started working for this recently last year. I started working for another facility just to kind of get back into clinical work again. Because I was in private practice for 4 years, and I had a, you know, I mean, it was a full. I mean, my private practice was like doing great, and
Yeah.
and when I left it, I was like, I'm never coming back to this. I was very jaded, and then when I came
Just
back in,
burnout.
like, oh, it was yeah, compassion fatigue. It was
Yeah.
a lot. There was a lot going on.
Hmm.
But my wife was supportive of me the whole time. Like she's incredible. And but when I came back, I mean, I had offers to be clinical director at several facilities and do different stuff, and like maybe even in business development. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and then like this opportunity came up just to be a therapist. And I, that was the direction God had me going. And I was like, this is what I need to do. I just need to get back into the clinical work and just kind of start practicing that again. And I did that for about 8 months. And during that eight month process, like, um, I went on a mission trip, and it kind of, me and my wife started talking about, like, what am I going to do? Like, I'm not going to be just a therapist at this facility for a long period of time. And we really started praying and talking to each other, and really thinking about what the future held for like my career, because my wife she's on this track doing what she's doing. She's doing really good. But then we started praying about what was next, and we were like, why don't we open a facility? um, and that's just over the last, since I would say January. That's how Firm Foundation Treatment Center kind of came up. I mean, it is a God ordained plan. I mean, it's not
Mm.
me. It is a spiritual movement in our life. And to go from a place of never believing that I was going to be in the field anymore to now, I just have this energy every day to do this and to help people again is really remarkable, because I love doing this work again, in a different way. Like before, I really liked it, but I was still searching for purpose and searching for like what my
Right.
calling was in the field. And now it's like I'm planted in it, and I know, like, I have there's a vision that, like, there's going to be like a lot of really great things that are going to happen. So,
That's great, man.
but yeah, I could talk about it for a long time, really. So
No,
I'm
that's
super excited.
exciting.
I know I'm just going. Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. I love that. There's a lot of not to make this about me, right? But there's a lot of synergies that I hear there. So I also have my, master's degree. It's in clinical mental health counseling. But when you were just talking about, the traveling back and forth for school and, trying to make family time and stuff like that, like I remember those days very, very well for sure. So and it's interesting. You mentioned that you stepped away from the field for a while. I have not done that, but I couldn't tell you how many times I've thought about doing that, right? Just burnout, compassion fatigue, totally can relate to that. But every time I've thought about doing it, I've always, had this epiphany that, like, "Hey, what am I talking about? Like, this is the only thing I do. This is what I just need to find a way to find some work-life balance and keep doing what I love, I guess, right?
Yeah.
No, that's great. Well, thank you. Thank you, Brian. Eddie, you want to share a little bit about yourself? Same thing, what's life had in store for you? How'd you get where you are now?
Yeah. So my name's Eddie Gleeson. I've been in the field 4.5 years now. I got started. I went to treatment myself. My uncle's in the industry, and essentially when I needed to go in 2019, he made it as easy as he possibly could make it to go to treatment, and that really stuck with me. When I got out, started to do my recovery process. I approached him and I said, I really want to do what you're doing. And, you know, I basically said, I want to give people the same opportunity I got to go to treatment. So I started working with him on the consulting side. He mainly works with railroads, and he sends people to recovery ways in Salt Lake City, which is where I went to treatment. Um,
Okay.
so he taught me, how to do business development, how to prospect, how to follow up, how to basically answer your phone and do some case management as well. And then I had a couple of jobs at a couple of different treatment centers. I've worked both in admissions and business development. Kind of like Brian, um, I said I'm going to get out of this industry, and I actually went to work for an EMR company called Lightning Step. And
Okay.
it was kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I could still interact with people in treatment, but I didn't. I thought I didn't want to be in the space, and so realized that just wasn't the right fit for me. Sitting at a desk all day and cold calling, and I like to be out interacting with people, taking them out to lunch. I love to play golf. That's something that's a passion of mine. So can sometimes do that on the job, but I got an opportunity to get back into the field, and take a business development job at a really large facility. And I guess it was February, when Brian reached out to me. I mean, I think that entire connection of how, we were put in contact with each other was totally orchestrated by God. I had no idea who Brian was. And it was actually a guy in Alabama who we both know who connected us. And, I think he was trying to find out if Charlotte was going to be a potential area to open this facility, because I live in Charlotte. So we got to talking, and a little bit of my background to where I'm at in my faith now is, I was in AA for 4 years, 4.5, still go to AA a little bit, but it was about a year and 4 months ago. So last March, I was in a really tough situation in life, and that was like the first time I had prayed to Jesus since I had gotten sober. I grew up a Catholic, but my faith wasn't really important to me. It was more, that's just what I had to do. Growing up, my whole family's Catholic. I did the whole Catholic school, all that. And I prayed to Jesus, and I said, please get me out of this situation. And if you do, then I'm going to dedicate everything to you. And in the meantime, I had a couple of guys, really close friends, kind of discipling me in that process, sending me sermons, talking to me about Jesus, and I wanted nothing to do with it when they were doing that. But when that happened, I got out of that situation, had the opportunity to move to Charlotte, and I said, I got to find a church. I'm going to find a church. I'm going to find a community. I did. And it's completely changed my life. It's provided me community. It's provided me a new way of life through scripture. And I just never, I never really thought in that lens my entire life. And it's changed everything. So kind of going back to this, encounter, with Brian in the beginning, I said no a couple times. I was like, I don't want to move to Atlanta. That's not going to happen. And we kind of went back and forth, and I prayed, and I realized that, the Lord wants me to do this. This is a gap in resources to combine Christian-based treatment with clinical. A lot of times you see a Christian program that has no clinical component. They are effective, but it doesn't suit everybody's needs that's out there, that's a believer, that is looking for services. So I think combining the two is it's going to be extremely effective, I really believe. So and especially because the area of the country that we're in, the Southeast, there's so many Christians, and it's just like everywhere else in the country. There's so many people struggling with addiction, with mental health, and just bringing those two together, I think is going to be extremely effective.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a good segue. So let's talk a little bit more about Firm Foundation. So it sounds like faith-based, Christian-based program. Is it residential level of care? Is that correct?
It's an outpatient treatment facility.
Okay.
So
Outpatient treatment facility.
Yep. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about
it.
Yeah, let's hear about, obviously you guys are very passionate about your faith. I mean, I share that myself, so we can definitely get down on that topic. But, why create the program the way that you did? I'm really interested in, like, what do you feel like is effective about it? what was kind of the calling there for you guys to take action on that?
Oh, um, so I would say the main driver personally behind, uh, well, for one, I've dedicated my life to Christ, and being able to uh, bring that into bring that into treatment, or kind of assist others who are Christians who are struggling with addiction or struggling with mental health, is something that I've noticed working in other treatment facilities. There's a challenge. There's almost like a resistance to Christ-centered care, or providing um, modalities, or providing types of structures within treatment that allow people the freedom, or allow therapists, the behavior techs, nurses, whatever, provides them the freedom to and that and the clients the ability to express freely, right? So that was kind of my past. I've noticed there's like a resistance to
Hmm.
talk about that. Does that make sense? Um,
Absolutely.
and so that was that was kind of the catalyst to it. And uh, and then just this past year, my faith has kind of skyrocketed, and it was kind of developing a model for that, developing a model for how we could do that. Because was it just going to be like Christ? Are we just going to talk about Christ? Are we going to like read the Bible? Um, are we going to like do discipleship groups? How can we do that and then be profitable as well? As
Hmm.
like, how do we do that, right? And so there are we decided to incorporate, because I believe that a lot of the facilities that run now that aren't Christ centered are very effective, because like I've operated in them as well. And like I see people
Hmm.
getting sober, living healthy lives, like living productive lives, sustained, free of drugs and alcohol, and their mental health is stabilizing. So I wanted to incorporate the two. I wanted to kind of meld them together, and that was kind of the initial thought process. And honestly, the curriculum is still coming together. It's not completed yet, and hopefully that kind of answered your question. I know I was a little all over the place
Yeah,
there, but
no, absolutely. And I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, it's and I'll just a little disclaimer here. So it is not the stance of New Waters Recovery that we are a faith-based program. However, myself as a professional and as an individual, believe very strongly in, Christian values and beliefs, and the importance of like faith and spiritual connection in the path of recovery. So just, putting that out there. And I completely share with you that, throughout my career, I've noticed that same thing, right? Like I believe that this is like a key ingredient to being able to find success in not just in recovery per se, but I think just in life in general, right? Finding peace and happiness and things like that. Like there is this element of finding spiritual connection, which I personally believe it's very difficult to do it without it. Let's put it that way. And to your point, like throughout my clinical career, it's really difficult to have those conversations with people sometimes when they're just resistant to it based on, prior experiences, or maybe even like spiritual trauma that they've experienced throughout their life with church experiences and things like that. Uh, Media, family, culture, whatever it is. I think not everyone, but a lot of people, when you try to broach that subject with them, there's a lot of resistance there. And one thing I've really enjoyed throughout my career is like, kind of studying that, trying different tactics, and like trying to figure out ways that like we know we need to have this conversation. I know that it's going to make a difference in our life. So how can we kind of navigate these conversations in a way to, I don't know, help people become a little bit more softer to the idea of maybe not, subscribing to a particular religion, but we got to find spirituality somehow, right? We got to find some way to connect with something bigger than us.
yeah, and like what you just said is, it is a difficult topic.
Hmm.
There's like a resistance to people discussing the discussing God with people. And
Hmm.
I believe I've done it, and I still do it. I'm not perfect,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
the reaction is to kind of not talk about it, or to pass it, to pass it to the next person, or to say, oh, we'll figure it out, or it'll get itself figured out. And that's kind of,
Mm-hmm.
that's a dysfunctional way of approaching spirituality, or approaching myself as a Christian. I've dedicated myself, and I've prayed a lot about not doing that anymore, and being more
Mm-hmm.
bold and convicted, and not doing that, because treatment facilities, for the most part, the the model has been 12-step recovery, and 12-step recovery is having a spiritual experience and having a
Mm-hmm.
relationship with a higher power, God. And so if you boil that down, like, being intentional from the get-go, being intentional when treatment starts, and opening up and being very honest and bold with people in the beginning, I believe there's going to be a more profound effect in treatment.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do. I agree
And
with
if I
you.
could jump in too, you know, I think myself and Brian are both products of being on the receiving end of that kind of God conversation.
Mm-hmm.
At least for myself, like I mentioned it, it wasn't until a year and 3 or 4 months ago where I became a Christian. And if you had approached me about that prior to that, I wouldn't really want to have the conversation about Jesus, especially. It was more higher
Mm-hmm.
power, 12-step based. But through people praying for me, people discipling, there was breakthrough. And, that can happen to anybody, right? If somebody is, not wanting to have that conversation, not wanting to engage, just not wanting to hear about it at all, there is still such an opportunity to speak life into them, and to, I guess, kind of disciple them to where the potential for that breakthrough happens. And when it does, at least in my experience, it uprooted my entire life in such a good way. And I, I really have nothing in my life right now that was the same as before I became a Christian, and that is in such a positive direction. So even working with people that are, you know, struggling with their relationship with God, or have that church hurt or spiritual hurt,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to have such a great opportunity, and be placed in a great spot for those people to speak life into them, to say, you know, God isn't against you. He's not after you, like, and here's scripture to back it up. Here's our testimonies to back it up. Here's so many other people's testimonies, in hopes that they can see that there's going to be there's a potential for so much positive change, and also being able to use those evidence-based practices that we know work: CBT,
Mm-hmm.
DBT, psychotherapy. They work, right? But what it's going to allow us to do, and allow God to do, is really um, start to uncover what they're going through, and then provide more room for God to come in and heal. I think that's a huge, at least for me, it's like when I have all this, bad stuff, uh, jumbled up in my system, it almost blocks God from coming through to work on me. And if, like, part of a deliverance is, really seeking out therapy, seeking out help, and not just saying, we're going to pray this away and it's going to be gone. It's no, you need to work through stuff. Yes, there's miracles, but there's also processes, right? Like, not every time
Mm-hmm.
someone's healed from addiction or healed from a physical ailment, it just happens on the spot. It can take time. And part of that process is seeking out therapy, seeking out conversations to work through those things, so that God can more easily heal. And I think that's our main goal, because we know that not. I'm hoping for miracles, right? I'm hoping that somebody comes in and they're like, "This is it. Like, God has healed me." But it's going to be a process for the vast majority of people, and we're here to assist them in working through that process, so God can ultimately do um, what He's going to do on them.
That's amazing. So tell me about, so what can, especially for any families or maybe even potential clients that may be listening to the podcast, what would it look like for a client to come into your program? What can they expect as far as, attendance and hours, and what kind of groups are they going to be in and that kind of stuff?
So the group schedule is I'm still trying to figure out if it's going to be like start at 9:30 or 10, but it's
Hmm.
essentially like 9:30 to 3:30 during the
Okay.
day. And if someone is at a PHP level of care, it's Monday through Friday. Their
Hmm.
IOP, it can be 5 days a week or 3 days a week, and the 3 days a week is flexible, and that's half day. So that would be like 9:30 to noon IOP. Um,
Gotcha.
and so the schedule currently is in the morning, there will be like a morning reflection prayer like group for about an hour. The second group will be a 2 hour, it's either hour and a half or 2 hours, um, group group therapy, like process group with your therapist. So each client will have a individual therapist, and they will also be in group therapy with that individual therapist. So they'll have like a small group, and they'll do individual therapy with that group therapist. So that'll be the second group of the day, and they'll have lunch and everything. And then the third group would be for PHP would be psych ed. So once you transition to IOP, you would be out of the psych ed portion.
Hmm.
So then the third group would be psych ed, and then the fourth group of the day, the last group, it's about an hour. It was going to be like a program reflection. Um, Program reflection is going to how it's going to be up scheduled, but it's like a testimonial group. So
Okay.
lots of things can happen in this group. So you can present assignments. You can talk about your struggles with housing. You can talk about your struggles with 12-step recovery. You can talk about your struggles with the treatment facility, not being able to follow the rules. It's really just like a forum group where people
Hmm.
can just present things and kind of like just get things out. And it's for an hour. So that
That's
would be the
great.
last group. That would be the last group of the day. So,
Very good.
and then
And
we'll
then you
have
mentioned,
some pastoral care coming in probably once a week for that 1 hour last group, maybe like on Fridays or Thursdays.
very cool. And then you
Yeah.
mentioned individual therapy. They'll receive individual therapy as well.
hmm Yeah. Once a
That's
week.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. And you guys, so is it in Atlanta proper or is it just outside?
It's outside. It's in Woodstock.
Okay.
So we're off,
Woodstock.
off Highway 92 in Woodstock. Yep.
Very cool. That's great.
Yep.
So I grew up in Columbus, Georgia. Brian, are you from Georgia originally?
I was born in Columbus, Georgia.
Oh, so was I. Columbus
Yeah.
Medical Center, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where I was born. I was born in Columbus Medical Center, raised in Dahlonega, Georgia, and
Okay.
Forsyth County, but that's where I was born. Yeah. My dad did his residency program there. He was a family practitioner, and that's where he did his residency program.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up in Columbus, and my dad still lives, across the river in Russell County, Alabama over there. So yeah, I was there for the first,
So,
18, 19 years of my life. And then I had to get out of Dodge. I had to move down to South Florida, which was maybe not the best idea at that time, but that's what happened.
yeah. Is that Phoenix
Cool.
City over there
Yeah.
next to Columbus?
Yeah, Phoenix City is just across the Chattahoochee River, and then Russell County is like the bigger area over there. He actually lives like in the middle of freaking nowhere, Russell County, Alabama, out there. But it's a beautiful state, man. Georgia is very beautiful.
Mhm. Cool.
We'll have to get out there next time we're in the area. We'll have to come out and see you guys, go to lunch
Oh,
and
absolutely.
check the place out.
Absolutely.
Well, good stuff. Well, guys,
I'll let Eddie coordinate that.
Absolutely.
yeah, perfect. Love that. Well, guys, I sometimes like to close these up with like, what would be one thing that you would want a family member or maybe somebody that's struggling right now? If you could leave somebody with kind of one nugget of wisdom, what would be that thing? Not to put you on the spot or anything,
You want to answer that, Eddie?
Sure. Well, I think to keep it simple is there's hope, right? And I tell everybody, my experience was that my thinking got me into treatment, and I got to listen. I got to listen to other people. I tell everybody that when you go into treatment, just listen and do what they say. um, and in the depths of thinking that you're never going to get out of this. Man, it's so hard to tell somebody that, right? That you're going to get out of it when they're so fixated, right? But I think that's where the faith comes in. Have faith. We even if you are dead set on believing that it's not going to happen, that you're going to stay this way forever, just give it a tiny bit of faith and see what happens, and listen in that process. Because for me, it got so much better, so much faster than it did getting worse in my addiction. When I decided to go into treatment and follow the rules and do the assignments, like it's almost unbelievable how quickly things changed for the better. So I know that can happen for anyone, and it's what you make of it, right? It's if you go into treatment and you do the work, you're gonna see the rewards. If you go into treatment and you're defiant, you're saying I don't want to do this stuff. I think that what they're telling me isn't going to work, right? It doesn't matter if you go to the Salvation Army Treatment Center or you go to Passages Malibu or $70,000 a month treatment center. Like if you have that mindset, it's a lot tougher for it to work rather than going in and listening. And that's on the flip side. You can get sober at the Salvation Army. You can get sober at the nicest treatment center in the country, right? It's all about what you're going to do with the time that you have while you're in there and how you're going to maximize it.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. Well said. Well, gentlemen, I really appreciate you guys taking some time to hang out with me today. Good conversations. Great to learn more about you guys and about the program. We'll make sure to put all the information and ways to contact you guys in your program in the show notes. And again, thank you guys so much. Appreciate hanging out with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Justin.
Thanks, guys.